Okay, Johnny, are we ready?
Yes, Tim, we're ready to go.
Okay, good evening, everybody. We will go ahead and call the Colorado Geographic Naming Advisory Board meeting to order. My name is Tim Mauck, Deputy Director for the Department of Natural Resources. Our Executive Director, Dan Gibbs, sends his regards. He is unfortunately out on a family emergency out of town. That said, I am going to be his representative to this board. Just a couple of housekeeping items here. We are, just a friendly reminder, we are being recorded this evening. And during the conversation, if you'd like to ask a question of my board members here, down under participants, you can open that box, and down in the right-hand corner is a button for raise your hand. And so with that, Johnny, is there any other housekeeping items I need to mention? We will be going into executive order, and during that time, later on this evening, we will move those that are not board members into a separate breakout box, and you may remain there, and we will report out following that executive order when we come back into session.
The other thing I might mention is that board members, you're able to mute and unmute yourself. So this is a free-flowing conversation. Just feel free to jump in whenever you see fit.
Great, thank you. Okay, also on behalf of DNR, I want to just start off this evening extending our deepest sympathies and concerns to those affected by the wildfires in Colorado, and our sincerest appreciation for our first responders and those working to assist our communities, friends, and neighbors. Commissioner Cimino, especially to you in Grand County, our thoughts go out to you. I hope you and your family are doing as well as possible. And if there's anything we can do, please do not hesitate to let us know.
Thank you very much, Tim. Well said.
Thank you. With that, let's go ahead and call the roll here. Representative Will.
Good evening.
Good evening. Representative Benavidez.
Here.
Representative Exum. Did not see Representative Exum here. Council Member Joseph.
Here.
Commissioner Cimino.
Here.
Miss Redhorse.
Here.
Mr. Way.
Is here.
Here. Yep, here. Okay. Miss Limerick.
Here.
Miss Berry.
Here.
Mr. Benitez.
Present.
Miss Nelson. Miss Gonzalez.
Here.
I am here. Mr. Garcia.
I'm present, Tim.
Thank you. Miss Ritter.
Here.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. First up here, we have appointment of temporary meeting chair. If you had a chance to take a look at the bylaws, we will be formalizing a chair and vice chair for this body. Until we do so, just like to set up a temporary chair for these meetings. If you are so inclined, I'd be happy to serve as the temporary chair for this meeting if we have a motion.
I so move.
So move.
Okay, let's say we've got a motion by Ms. Ritter, and Mr. Way, we'll have you as a second.
That's fine.
Okay, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signal by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. Now we will move into public comment. If there's any public comment at this moment, please signal by raising your hand in the little chat section there. Ms. Abad, do we have anybody volunteering for public comment?
Not at this time.
Okay, we will close public comment and we will now move to the consideration of the bylaws. Let me step back for a second here. As we get our muscle memory here, we will, going forward, be sure to get you the meeting minutes and be sure to adopt those. We will adopt last meeting's minutes at the following meeting. That said, our last meeting was posted online, and so you or the public, I just remind you that you're able to go onto our website and review that meeting, as well as this meeting will be posted also. So with that, we'll go ahead and move to the consideration of the bylaws. I want to thank Deputy Attorney General Amy Beatie and Lindsey Ratcliff for their assistance in pulling the draft bylaws together. This is a working session. We will walk through those bylaws, and Ms. Beatie and Ms. Ratcliff will get those prepared for us to consider and adopt at our next meeting. So with that, Amy, may I turn this over to you? And did you want to share your screen, or how do you want to work this?
Lindsey is going to share the screen and she's going to put up the bylaws. If you have trouble reading it, it will also help if you have them on your own. If you have a printer and want to print them out, that may be helpful as well. And then the plan between the two of us was that we would walk through each of the articles that are provided in the bylaws, let you know the things that were discretionary and not, so that you are aware of where you have some flexibility in terms of what we are proposing, and really focus on the meat of them. Backing up really quickly, I just wanted to give a really big shout out of thanks to Lindsey Ratcliff. I serve as counsel to DNR, and because this board was nested within DNR, I serve as counsel to this board. But make no mistake, Lindsey has done an incredible amount of work on making sure that you all launched and launched lawfully, and has done a lot of research and worked around the clock in support of everything that you see here. So I'm really grateful to have her on our team. She serves in a fellow capacity, meaning she's with us for a year. And then also excitingly, we have some of our interns on the call today. The Department of Law has a really robust internship program. And I think I saw two of our interns, Jesse Ogle and Leah Varshali, on the call. I think that the other two were unable to make it, but our interns also serve a really important role because we have a very fixed team, but we have a very dynamic business environment. So I just wanted to say thanks and hi to them.
Amy, if I could just welcome your interns, and then thank you, Lindsey, very much. And then just for the general public, if you'd like to also follow along on the bylaws, you can again go to our website. You can press the agenda, and on the agenda for tonight's meeting, there is a link for our bylaws, our draft bylaws. Thank you.
So we had a conversation at the last meeting about continuing to set up your business structure, and did talk about getting bylaws established for you all. So what you have is a draft that Lindsey and I put together and worked up through a session pretty similar to this with staff at DNR, Chris and Tim and Johnny. And so we're going to march you through article by article. I am assuming that folks don't have questions about Article 1. It's simply saying that you are the Colorado Geographic Naming Advisory Board, and that you were established pursuant to executive order, and that you live within the Department of Natural Resources. So I'm going to let you all just quick, you should just say, hey, Amy, stop, because I have a question here. But I'm going to go through each of the articles and share with you some of the things that we thought were important to highlight. So
Amy, can I interrupt? It looks like the host has disabled my ability to share screen. So I don't know if Johnny, if you might be able to share your screen instead, or give me access. Sorry for the confusion.
No, it's okay. And let's just do a quick point of order. Do you all have your own version of the bylaws? And if you do, is it actually better that you can see each other for this discussion, as opposed to having a big document in the middle of the screen and less line of sight to the reactions of your fellow board members? What would you prefer?
This is Cathy. I would prefer to see the faces of my fellow board members.
Okay, unless there's anybody without a copy, let us know. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and be able to look at each other and review the bylaws by ourselves here.
Yep, and I'm also looking at some materials on another screen over here. So if somebody's trying to grab my attention, raised a hand or did anything like that, just give me a shout out. Article 2 is your purpose. You will recall from our last meeting, I think it was Representative Benavidez who underscored the fact that the executive order provides this board with a broader purview than just the kinds of naming issues that will arise in partnership with the USBGN. And so in order to address the fact that you have a broader purview than just that bucket of naming activities, we separated the two of them out. And the idea behind that was to call attention to the fact that you had a broader purview, that some of the names that come before you will be worked up in partnership with the USBGN, but also that you have additional authority. And we had decided that it would be more important for you to focus on the work that you will do with the USBGN. And in that way, you can begin to address the backlog very quickly. And you can, once you get your sea legs, you can begin to think about how you may want to address this other category of naming that you have authority over according to the executive order. So that was a kind of compromise approach on Lindsey's and my part to make sure that you're aware that you have a broader purview than what goes before the USBGN, and also to give you all the opportunity to be very clear about which piece of your authority you're working under at a given time. I'm going to pause and see if you guys have any questions.
I have questions. I think it's appropriate to separate these, but my comment was really about, from the executive order, it talks about the geographic features in certain public places. And in paragraph A of Article 2, that's the part that is based on the geographic features. And there you, which is fine, separating them out. But then you say, as well as canals, channels, and reservoirs. Are those not geographic features that we are adding those? Because you don't say such as, you say as well as, which means they would be in addition to geographical features. I'm not even sure we have any channels in Colorado. Maybe we do, I don't know, that have names.
This discussion point came up at the last meeting. The USBGN described its purview and said that it was natural features it was focused on, and also mentioned that that included canals, channels, and reservoirs. And board member Limerick raised the point that canals and reservoirs are not natural features, that they're actually man-made features. And our information from the USBGN was that they consider them natural features and include them. So we called it out. We don't need to, but I thought that if we were going to use things like natural geographic features, it was important to make the distinction between that and features that are not.
Are those?
And Patty has a question. Patty?
A comment.
A
I am
comment.
the perpetrator. I think I am the perpetrator of this problem because I could not for my life figure out why a reservoir was considered natural. So
But do we
I
have?
the question, and because that person from US board had just been so clear about saying that reservoirs counted. So I've raised that question. The dams don't count, but the reservoirs do. So I guess I'm not sure I should over with an apology, but I think I am the one who set this in motion. But I am delighted that the second provision of this thing says that we can cover all kinds of different names. I'm delighted by that. So I want to say that, but I also want to say I believe that I was the one who created this.
And thanks for that background on that. And if that's why that's included as well. But Patricia, you also said that does not include dams. Are dams considered natural geographic features?
I certainly don't want us to spend much time on this, but no, that the lady from the National Board said no, that dams are not natural features, but reservoirs are. And I would be so happy to host an hour seminar on this question of the naturalness of a dam and the, or not.
Right. And
Yeah.
I'm just asking with relation to the bylaws. I didn't know we had channels in this state, but I thought we do have dams in this state.
We've got dams.
And so if we're saying as well as these things that are non-natural, shouldn't we include dams in that?
Dams are not, Jennifer Runyon is actually on this call. She is our liaison with the USBGN. And she drew the distinction between reservoirs and dams at the last discussion. So dams are not in the list of things that the USBGN will consider, but the canals, channels, and reservoirs were. And because they're not natural features, we felt it was important to treat them differently in the definition of what will qualify under section 1A, which are the things that will go in we will work on in partnership with the USBGN.
Okay,
And-
that explains it. So I don't have any more questions about A, but I do about B. Should I wait to see if there's more questions about A? Chair.
Are there any more questions about A? No, and then I just point out real quick that Ms. Runyon did say in the chat there, if you're able to see that, there are 8 named channels in Colorado. But with that, Representative Benavidez, I'll pass it back to you for item B.
Okay, on B, and I'm glad we did put this separate, but it says, and certain public, man-made geographic features in certain public places. So the geographic features, some of those I think are not public. And I don't know if we wanted to really extend authority to a church, since that's not public, or the naming of a shopping center. Is that really what we want to consider in those other geographic features, or certain public places? Because those are listed as geographic features, not certain public places, where I would think those shopping centers, churches, hospitals, schools, airports are certain public places.
I think a very simple solution to this, to provide you all with the most flexibility possible, but also not to include things that you didn't intend to, is to delete the last sentence.
And
Makes sense.
except we don't have, and there is no definition in the executive order for certain public places. So I raised that question last time. What does that mean? What are certain public places? Does that mean certain places that we designate or the governor designates, or what are certain public places?
So my feeling about answering this question is that you will decide what that means when you undertake a process, establishing a process for recommendations about quote unquote certain public places. And when Lindsey and I were communicating with the staff about the bylaws, we also talked about the fact that it may be important for you all to focus on section 1A, since it's clean and you're clear about what your purview is, because the USBGN helps support some sideboards around what will be considered there. We are also going to talk later about process for getting name recommendations in front of you. You are likely, based on our recommendation, you're going to create process for considering recommendations under both 1A and 1B. And our recommendation is to start with 1A and unpack 1B when you have your sea legs.
I don't know exactly what sea legs mean in this context, because what I'm asking about is if we leave B in as certain public places and geographic features, then people that want to submit proposals to us could still submit under B. And if there's no kinds of direction to that, then I don't think the public is helped at all by this process. Because I could see a road or even a school, but if we decide schools are not in there, then why would we want people to submit it to us? And that's why I'm asking. That I think we need a little bit more direction for the public and for ourselves.
I think the direction for the public is possible to put on the website and say, these are the 2 categories of recommendations we'll be receiving. We are only open to receive section 1A recommendations right now. You have a 16 name backlog. Jennifer, is that right? It's 16. You have a 16 name backlog. I know there is some interest in moving on those. And I think it's okay to tell the public that they need to wait until you build up a process and have defined the terms around section 1B. If you'd like to do them both simultaneously, there's no legal reason to only do 1A. We were just trying to actually give you guys a sort of manageable kind of first bite at doing this work. And what I meant by sea legs is when you get accustomed to working together and have created processes and have begun to actually work on some of the name changes associated with 1A, then you may have a better sense of how you want to tackle 1B.
And thank you for that explanation. And I guess I've gotten emails and calls from people that want to go beyond just what's covered under the federal one. And so if we start and don't accept applications, especially when there's immediate interest and concern about this board, that it seems like we're telling the public, you know, we want to do this, but we don't want to do that piece of it now. That's my concern, having to deal with the public part of it. I don't like to limit it. I mean, if we have 16 and we get 20 more, then we've got 36. And we don't have to accept them all. And we have to figure out through our policies how we're going to evaluate them. If it's first in, first out, or what are we going to do? So I guess I'm just, as a public official, I don't like to say, you know, we set this up for both things, but we don't want to hear from that part of it.
I'm wondering, and Amy, maybe you can help us out here, help me out here, whether that's something we still need to kind of consider and explore, and as well understand our authority in this, or the ability to change names. While we could consider them or make recommendations to the governor, I'm not certain that everything that we might be asked to review, the governor or the state actually has the authority to affect the name change. And I think that's something that we're going to have to kind of contemplate as we put this back together. In the meantime, if we just delete that last line, as the Deputy Attorney General suggests, I think we remain consistent with the executive order. And we can then explore that process as we get a little bit more as was characterized experience working on and with the BGN.
Well, I guess personally, I'm fine with leaving out that sentence. I'm not fine because it's not a decision of these bylaws to determine how we accept proposals or not. That would be a policy decision that the board would have to make, but not a function of the bylaws.
The bylaws don't purport to give you guys your process for how you will consider name recommendations under section 1A or section 1B. And that is actually a topic for discussion later in the meeting. And so essentially what we're doing here is not spelling out process and not telling the public what category of name change recommendations you'll accept. We're just simply chopping them into 2 different buckets so that you can handle them separately.
No, I agree. I was just speaking to what the chair was saying. He was saying to accept both, removing that sentence and that we just accept those. That was what my comment was addressing.
I think we can save the discussion about process for how you will hear recommendations in the 2 different categories for later so that we can continue to move through the bylaws. The bylaws were really designed to be your sort of business structure, your process decisions and process discussions about how you process the recommendations is separate from your bylaws discussion. So we're still working to get all of your pieces set up, your business structure, how you're, you'll see later in the document that we've got officers that are proposed. So if we can get through the business structure, we can then move on to talk about process for how you will accept recommendations.
Let me
just for clarification, is the process something that will be brought back to the board for a vote? So there will be an opportunity to weigh in on the process at a later date.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep. And we have a discussion with you in executive session later to get some direction from you about this particular topic.
Let me recognize Board Member Limerick. Were you raising your hand? And you're on mute.
Representative Benavidez knows much more about this and public participation than I do, but I am a supporter of 1B because I do feel that there are reasons why this would serve the citizens. I was involved, I'll give an example, with the Stapleton renaming question, and I don't know if the governor would have had any authority, but I think that that community was divided and troubled enough to having a deliberative board have a thought about that would have been helpful to that community. I did get to play some part in that. So I just want to speak enthusiastically about 1B, even though I understand that it is quite open-ended in its meaning. But I see places where this board could really serve the citizens who are struggling with difficult issues by weighing in whether or not, and I'm not sure that we should have the deciding power, but I do think that would have been useful in at least the case that I knew firsthand the best. So sorry, that's all.
Okay. Anybody else wishing to mention? Board Member Benavidez.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I would echo Patty's comments and just say if it's going to come back to us, to Cathy's point, let's try to get through this one, and then we let the rest of the body of what we're going to review tonight inform that final decision.
Does that sound good with everybody? Okay, cool.
Powers and duties, Article 3. Yes, we're moving on. Let's see nods. Yes. Right on. Okay. So automatically I see that we will.
I'm sorry, I didn't know when you say moving on Article 3, on paragraph B, did you say to move past it or to it?
No, we are now considering Article 3 and the content of Article 3. I already see 2 periods. That must be a function of some cleaning up of some redlining. And I also see that we, the same sentence that we eliminated above in Article 2, we will delete from section 1B, the such geographic features include. That language can be stricken. In here, again, we've bifurcated the work between the work that will go in partnership with the USBGN and then the certain public places work. So we've separated them out to be clear that you have powers and duties that are different based on the recommendations that you receive. And it also lists other duties spelled out in the executive order.
Could I just, I think this part is good, except when it just says in 2 or 3 places that we make recommendations. Sometimes people will only look at the bylaws and they won't look at the executive order at the same time. And the executive order is clear that we make the recommendations to the governor. And this doesn't say that anywhere as to who our recommendations are going to. So as I would like to see that as part of the bylaws, since that's the only thing we really have the authority to do under the executive order.
I'm looking at you, Tim, because I'm wondering if you want to talk a little bit here about discussions about process.
Yeah, and so, yeah, thanks, Amy. So part of the process here also is how we are working with the governor's office. And we've had some conversations, most particularly in regards to our work with the national board, the BGN, and that in making our recommendations, we would make those recommendations and inform the governor and his office of our recommendation that we will be submitting forward to kind of streamline some of that communication between the BGN and this body in the process in general, but leave some time available for the governor's office to respond. It's an interesting comment, Representative Benavidez. I think going back to probably the Article 2 there to be specifically in what that might look like. And so, Deputy Attorney General, I wonder if that is a delineation that we need to make, or when 21B might be a recommendation specifically to the governor. We haven't actually discussed that. I think when the executive order was put forward, it was leaving an option there that goes beyond our work with the BGN, but it wasn't thoroughly defined necessarily how that might completely operate.
Well,
If it helps, we are happy to just say to the governor, and so that the language tracks the language in the executive order, and then we can spell out in the event that there are more refinements to exactly what that process looks like, we can spell that out in the process document.
yeah. And I guess I'm looking at the executive order, and it's pretty clear that under the mission and scope, that any recommendations we make are to the governor. And it also is in our powers and duties under the executive order that the recommendations go to the governor. And I'm just thinking for these bylaws, if somebody in the public just pulled up the bylaws and had not read the executive order, and it just says we make recommendations, but it doesn't say who we're making them to, that I think it's just more for clarity that consistent with the executive order that we say we're making them to the governor.
Happy to make that change.
Thumbs up on that change there.
All good.
Okay. And then we can deal with this in the actual the processes that we lay out.
You were also given authority not to hear all of the recommendations or not to take them all up in the executive order. So Article 3, Section 1C says that you have the power to decline to review a request for a name change and to meet as necessary or as the governor deems appropriate, and to establish internal policies and procedures so that you can do your work. All of that is pulled basically from the executive order. So that's what we have to share with you on Article 3. If we're okay with the language in Article 3, I'm happy to move on to Article 4.
Is there a thumbs up?
I have my hands raised actually for Article.
Junie has her hand raised, Commissioner.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. You were just about getting there. I just thought 1C was a bit unclear as to the board has the following powers and duties. And I was wondering, it doesn't really delineate how many or who and how. I went to Article 8 and it was still very unclear. How is this process goes when it comes to declining to review?
So the bylaws were, thanks, Junie, or Director Joseph, Board Member Joseph.
No, Junie. I'm Junie, that's perfect, it works.
Okay. So the bylaws are not designed to spell out the process. The bylaws are designed to get your business structure set up. So it's got powers and duties. You have the membership of the board, officers of the board, how and when you'll hold meetings, whether or not you can establish committees, how you'll vote, what kind of a voting process you want to use for the board. The the actual process to do the work of the board, to consider name change recommendations or to decline to consider name change recommendations, that information is not designed to be spelled out in your bylaws. That will be spelled out in different discussions that we will have about different documents that we will recommend that you adopt, like a guidance document for the public for how to submit name change recommendations, and then the ways that you all will process those name recommendations when they come in. We're just not there yet.
Thank you.
Board Member Ritter.
I'm wondering if in section A, if we should also reference the Board of Geographic names. It's referenced in the first section, but not, it's referenced in Article 2, but not in Article 3.
Yeah, so it makes sense to me that we would actually harmonize those two paragraphs, and they are different. So why don't we make sure that Article 2, Section 1, A and B are reflected verbatim in Article 3, Section 1, A and B, and then there can be no question about what your powers and duties are and the scope of your authority is.
Right. And then just a follow-on question there, and I think many of us are having sort of that struggle between what's in the bylaws and what's going to be in the policy. Jennifer Runyon, the last time around, had referenced that different states do, approach this, the federal naming issues a bit differently, and some take their cues from the Board of Geographic Names, and some initiate the process. And I wondered if that should be in the bylaws, or does that strike you as being more of a policy question that we'll deal with later?
The Lindsey and Tim and Chris and Johnie and I banged on that a little bit when we were bringing the bylaws to you, and decided that making a decision was best for your process as opposed to your bylaws. Okay. So we are aware that that will need to be hammered out. We just think it's more appropriate for your process as opposed to being scripted into your bylaws.
Okay.
Okay, I'm scanning the field here to see if there's any other Board Member Benavidez.
Yeah, I think I kept thinking of what Member Joseph was saying about our policies and procedures in E, that talks about establishing policies and procedures for conducting meetings, considering name changes, providing recommendations. That should there be some catch-all under there if there's something we're not thinking about? Because that's a very limited list. We may have policies for dealing with the media. We may have policies for, I don't know, as a board, other things, meeting with the governor's office. I'm not sure, but that's just very limiting. Or
would it be?
I would just want to add, or other policies, or as we deem appropriate or something.
Yeah. I'm wondering here if, I think that's an interesting point, to establish internal policies and procedures it deems appropriate, including but not limited to conducting its meetings, considering, would that work then?
Yeah. Yep. Representative Benavidez, does that work for you?
Yes.
And I am assuming that if we are making changes to the bylaws and we don't hear any objection from any of the board members, that your silence is assent. Okay. All right. Do we have additional question about Article 3, your powers and your duties? Okay. I'm going, okay, I see some thumbs up. Perfect. Okay, beautiful. So Article 4, your membership, we pulled also from the executive order. There was a distinction between those who were the final three, the executive director of DNR as designee, the executive director of DOLA or as designee, and the director of the tourism office or designee. The others were sort of styled more as in the discretion of the governor. But we simplified it by just saying all these folks serve at the discretion of the governor. So it is not exactly reflective of the language from the executive order, but it is intended really just to be a list of the people who the governor believes could be appointed to this board, because it does say also up to 15 members. So I think he could decide not to appoint or reappoint someone in the event that somebody says they're going to leave, and the language says up to 15 members. So it is not required that all these people be on the board, and we've drafted it so that that is reflected here. The second part of this, section 2, is that your initial appointments were for 2-year or 4-year terms. The staff at the Department of Natural Resources has, you called it something really fun, the magic book, something. Where's Johnny? You've got a magic document where you keep track of all of the members of your boards and commissions, and that you are clear about when there will be when people's terms are up and that they'll need to be reappointed, and that you've got a good communication process with the governor. So this is really just to memorialize what is in the executive order that says that board members were indeed appointed for 2 or 4-year terms. And then if there's a midterm vacancy and someone is reappointed into that vacancy, it will be for the remainder of that person's unexpired term. That's language directly from the executive order.
And Amy,
Yeah.
Amy, it's called the Bible page.
Oh, Bible. Yeah. Okay.
Bible page. Yes.
Thank you, Johnny.
You're welcome.
So regular attendance is really important. We want to make sure that you guys stay on top of things and don't lose sight of the thinking of your fellow board members. So this is not required, it is discretionary, but we did add that there is an emphasis on making sure that people make these meetings. And then we've got a process in the event that somebody has missed 3 meetings in a given year. You will note that we did not actually spell out how frequently you will have meetings in the bylaws. We said that you can call meetings. We've given people authority to call meetings. Staff talked about wanting to meet. Tim, can I share this? Is this? Yeah, staff had talked about wanting to meet monthly right now in order to get you guys up and running. And there may come a point where you decide a monthly time step is too frequent, or you want to meet every 2 weeks. It will be up to you. It's not scripted. You're not bound by your bylaws to any kind of meeting calendar, and we can get to that later. But essentially it says if you miss 3 board meetings in a year, if you decide you want to meet quarterly, meeting 3 board meetings means you're going to miss 3/4 of your board meetings. So, but we did decide that we wanted to make sure we put a number in there.
Amy, let me stop you there real quick. I saw Representative Benavidez, you had a hand up.
Yeah, 2 things. I understand why you want a number, but I don't want to put a number if we don't know how often we're meeting. Because if we only meet quarterly and we put in our bylaws, you miss 3 meetings, that's bad. 3 meetings in a year. And if someone's ill or something like that, I mean, I've been on boards and with bylaws that sometimes there's some discretion that's allowed, especially during these times in a pandemic or other things. And I can also speak to, I'm going to, Perry, I hope you're listening to this, as elected officials, we get really caught up and may want to attend meetings from January through May. And sometimes we may not be able to make them, unfortunately. And different people in their jobs may have that. So I would not want to put a number in until we made a decision on how many meetings we are going to have in a given year, and then determine what's a good number for that, because this makes it, I mean, it just says that they will notify the board chair, but they're not removed. And I guess I would think we could track that ourselves through minutes, and somebody could track it. And that was my second question, is board administrator term is not ever mentioned in the executive order. It's mentioned in these bylaws. It's never defined. I don't know what that position is or who it is. And I think if we're going to establish it, we need to clarify what it is. And if we are, I would think I'm not sure why they would notify that person or the DNR executive director if we have a chair and a vice chair of this board. Why wouldn't they be notifying them instead of these other two? And so maybe you all can clarify why that's in there that way.
You know, I'll just kind of take a stab there. I think we were just looking for, is there a point in which attendance might be a concern, and just identify that up front in terms of notifying the DNR executive director. I think to your point, and I completely agree that extenuating circumstances, especially for, as you point out, the legislature and that time frame between January and May and other times during the year, I can understand are exceptional times and can be very challenging to make the meetings. I think we're just looking to clarify this. I think that in the end, we could strike this language, and we would probably, if board attendance somehow was compromising the work of this body, that might be something that we might just go ahead and track, and at some point, if it is an issue, we can raise it and have a conversation with that individual.
I would agree with that. But maybe since this is the first time board administrator comes up, and again, it comes up in other places and it's nowhere defined. I don't know who or what that is.
Let us, yeah, and we'll get to that. And maybe it might be, I'm not an attorney here. It might be a staging thing in the document perhaps, but I thought we had addressed that, but we can discuss that. And Amy, I think that's later on in the document. Do we want to discuss that?
Yeah,
or
it
do you
came
want
up
to
when
bring
we
it
were talking through Article 12, all the way at the bottom, it says board staff. And we had talked among us before we brought this draft to you all about the fact that Johnie would be serving in the role as board administrator. It is, we're happy to define what the role is. By nature of the conversation we had about the role included things like taking the minutes, making sure the minutes are posted, posting the agenda, working with the team to draft the agenda. You have no staff really yet. The executive order spelled out staff who might be able to support the board, but we decided that a role of board administrator would provide at least some staffing bandwidth for this board. There's definitely the need to support you guys when you are not meeting, and to make sure that you're complying with your legal requirements, like posting your agendas and notice of your board meetings 24 hours in advance. So I'm happy to add to Article 12 that we can define who the board administrator is and what they'll do. This is a significant benefit to the board to have Johnie serving in this capacity, because otherwise we don't you don't have anybody.
Or we could do a board secretary or board coordinator. It doesn't necessarily have to be a board administrator. And also, I work closely with Tim and Dan. So I think it's a good fit.
Well, except in the executive order. I mean, I think it's great to have a person, but the executive order says that this is established in the Department of Natural Resources, and staff assistant is provided by the Office of the Governor and the Department of Local Affairs, not DNR.
I don't know that that was necessarily exclusive. Because it's housed within DNR, I think it would be safe to assume that we would have staff that would be working on this. And I think that's evident here by the staff from DNR that has provided assistance. Also provide some level of a consistency. I also think in regards to some of the other departments, and we can have that conversation a little bit later, but I don't want to speak for Rick Garcia, but in some cases we will be doing, let's say, outreach to some of our local communities to get their opinion on some of the proposals. And that is where Rick and his staff have have already kind of extended that offer to provide a service there. So I don't know that it was just limiting to those staffs, but like I said, because it's housed within DNR, I think it's safe to assume that we will have staff working on this, and having Johnie participate in this role is very much well needed, and provides a level of consistency and collaboration with the director, the executive director of DNR.
And I don't see a problem with having that person, but I think it has to be defined. And it has to be, when you call somebody a board administrator, is that a voting member or non-voting member? What is their actual role? And I don't think that is defined. And back on the one we're looking at, Article, I haven't got lost as to where we at, Article 4, it's not defined, which is the first time it's used.
So we're happy to put a parenthetical in the document that says as defined below, and then add a paragraph to Article 12 in board staff that is, we could do section 2 board administrator, and then spell out who it is and the role that that person will play, what sort of authority or responsibility it has, voting or non-voting. I think I'm less concerned about what authority the board administrator has, because the board members are clearly spelled out in the executive order and in your bylaws. But again, happy to define the role in Article 12.
Well, and you're right, the members are defined, but we could make one of the members the board administrator, just like a secretary of an organization. And that's why I think it has to be clear that it is just a designated staff person that is not a board member, because it could be something else.
So we can make that definition in that document if you're fine with that.
But going back to section 3, it's on Article 4, going back to who, if board administrator is defined, if somebody misses 3 days or 3 meetings, well, you had said taking all that out and work on that later, that whole sentence. Is that?
I think, yeah, I think, and I'm looking at Amy now, I think we can remove that unless I mischaracterized the conversation of including that.
I'm looking for Article 3, Section 4, and Article 3 only has a Section 1, so now I'm not sure where we are.
It's on the bottom of page 2. It goes to Section 2, 3, 4, 5 in Article 4.
Article 4.
Article 4 starts at the bottom of page 1.
Yeah, we're happy to work up Section 3 so that it reflects your comments.
Yeah. Okay. We can strike that line. Is there any other discussion on this issue? Is everybody okay?
Fine, Tim.
Okay. Thank you. Amy, you still with us there? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
So Section 4 allows you to resign anytime by notifying DNR's executive director in writing. Because this is housed within DNR, it seemed appropriate to let the DNR executive director know if you can't serve.
I have a problem with that because we're appointed by the governor. If I have to resign, I'm going to notify the governor. I might also let the chair of the board know and the DNR director, but I want to notify the governor if there's a reason I have to resign.
Anyone have any objections to adding and the governor to this? Notify the governor and the executive director of DNR in writing?
And the chair of the board.
No objection.
No objection.
Any other thoughts on Section 4? Moving on to Section 5. Section 5 is essentially a reminder that when you speak about what is before the board, If the board has not made a formal decision, you are speaking in your individual capacity. You may not invoke a decision of the board that has not been made, or to suggest that you speak on behalf of the board when you all haven't made a decision. I will use as an example, if you all receive a proposal to rename a peak, a different name, and you're on a podcast and you are asked what your thoughts are about renaming that peak, you may share your own independent and personal opinion, but if the board has not made a decision about what to rename that peak, you need to just make sure that you're speaking in your individual capacity and not invoking the board, because the board will not have made a decision if the board has not made a decision on it. So this is just to clarify when you may speak, what you may speak about, and how you need to be clear that you are not invoking the board if the board has yet to make a decision about a particular proposal.
Any comments or questions on section 5? Thumbs up if we're good. All right.
Right on. Article 5, officers. This was a recommendation that Lindsey and I had made to staff at DNR about what kind of officers you would want to have. There is no legal requirement for you to have officers. There is no legal requirement for you to have a chairperson and a vice chairperson. Representative Benavidez mentioned that the board administrator could be named an officer. So this was really just, this is a recommendation for you all to react to and let us know if you think that this is appropriate. You may amend your bylaws later if you decide that you need more bandwidth than you provided. You may also amend them to decide that you need different bandwidth than what you provided here. So recall that this is not written in stone. It is just designed to give you some firmed up leadership so that you actually have a person who is responsible for calling meetings, making sure the meetings occur, making sure that the board is coordinated with staff at DNR and otherwise. And so this is just a suggestion about how to have officers to ensure the smooth functioning of the board. And then what the obligations are, or duties, sorry, the duties of the chairperson are spelled out. And then there is also a provision in here for when the chairperson cannot be available.
Can we go back to section 1 of that, the officers? Because I don't have a problem with being a chair and a vice chair. I wasn't suggesting the board administrator be an officer. I was saying it could be, and that's why it had to be defined if it was a board member. But, and if you're going to clarify board administrator as someone appointed by the DNR executive director to assist in functions to help us, I have no problems with that. The terms, though, are the D, that they may be reelected to serve an additional term up to a total of 3 terms. So we could have conceivably a chair for 4 years. I think this board, since we have such vast experience, I would like it to be what several other organizations do, is we elect a chair and we elect a vice chair, and then the next year the vice chair is sort of like the chair-elect and then becomes the chair, and then we elect another chair-elect instead of chair and vice chair. So everybody, we can rotate it around. Everybody will have an opportunity to serve as chair if they want to be elected as chair-elect, as vice chair, and then they just serve 1 year at a time. I just think everybody brings so much different experience that it would be helpful to do it that way. I don't really like having someone have the potential to be chair for 4 years in a row.
Are there comments or reactions from our board members regarding Representative Benavidez's comment there?
James Rick Garcia.
Go ahead.
I don't have a particular problem with what member Benavidez is suggesting in terms of rotating chair and chair-elect. I would just want to be certain that someone has the ability to run a meeting and be able to ensure that there's balance, perspectives are heard, if there's public hearings held. I don't know if those will even come to pass, but that someone has the ability to ensure that we get the work done that's set on a particular agenda as this commission continues to meet. That would be my only concern. So obviously someone either rotating in and out would want to know that they have the ability to master those kinds of meeting characteristics. And that's my only concern. I don't particularly have a problem with what Adrienne is suggesting.
Yeah, and Rick, just to clarify, I wasn't suggesting that we just rotate through all 15 of us. Just it would change every year if we elect a chair and a chair-elect, but you would have to run for it or be nominated and agree to serve as that.
Yeah.
And you would have to make the decision of whether you could chair. If you don't feel comfortable chairing a public meeting or even this board, then you don't have to accept a nomination. But it gives 1 year for the vice chair to learn what's going on and follow the chair's lead. And then that person would be ready to step up.
Yeah. Okay, I agree. That makes sense.
Any other comments?
Patty
Board
has
Member
her
Lee.
hand raised.
Yes.
Right. So I am just wondering about continuity and experience in that. And I have been in situations where someone has been chair of something for too long, and I have been in situations where someone has been chair for too short a period of time. And I'm not sure if this is the sort of situation where really knowing the intricacies and the ins and outs of a board and its processes is going to be really necessary, or if somebody has been serving and attending meetings, maybe they would have that anyway. But I would just like to raise the idea, and again, I do feel that Representative Benavidez has a lot more experience than I do in this world, but is there something to be said for not having that frequent a rotation and having someone who really knows the ropes continuing for more than a 1 year term as chair? So I've just have been in situations where someone who came in clearly was not the equal of the person who had been in for a year or two and knew the situation. So and I don't really know that I have a position I'd prefer to reach on that, but I can see some reason why not having quite so rapid a set of rotations might be good.
I agree with Patty. I've been on quite a few boards where you get somebody who's really good and really likes to be chair. And the rest of the members would really like to keep them on.
Yeah.
And Tim, Junie has her hand raised as well.
Yeah, I think I appreciate the comments made about the experience. And I was looking at 1B, and I wonder if 1B, for instance, having the elections annually in December, and I think we all come in, or we were appointed back in June. So I'm thinking, and I think we also, our terms end either in June, July. I don't remember the exact timing, but I think it's in the summer. So I'm thinking that may give new people the opportunity to, to be involved, but I'm wondering, is that too soon? So I appreciate the comment about having someone who learns the rope first. And I wonder if 1B, why was December chosen as opposed to a different time of the year, maybe closer to the summertime?
Just go ahead, Tim.
No, I was just asking for thoughts. Amy, go for it.
The December was added because it's the end of the year, and we thought it was a good time to have a break, that there tends not to be a lot of really hot things happening in December. And so it seemed like an actually acceptable and okay time to be handing the baton, especially for a board like this that I think requires some continuity and expertise. But we're not married to it. So if there are reasons why we should stray from it, again, all of this was designed to give you guys things to think about and react to and reflect back to us if it doesn't work, because there's nothing legally required here. This was just us trying to cut through a lot of the noise about what you could do and make recommendations that you're more than welcome to change.
And to Junie's question, the board terms are from August to August, so they'll switch out in August in 2022 and 2024.
Thank you. My experience has been on different boards, and I'm sure all of you have different experiences as well, is that sometimes the board chair actually step down when either that person is leaving closer to that time. So just my thought that it makes sense around maybe before the next group comes in, as opposed to you just come in, you don't really know anybody, and then you have to vote. So whether your vote will be as important, or, well, it will be important, but whether you will fully understand the work and who you're voting for, if you're voting for a member. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yes. Let's let me step back here for just one quick second, and then just for those wondering, when we get through this section 1, I want to give everybody a quick break. So let me go back and ask and see if we're comfortable with structuring this so that these are 1-year positions, and that the vice chair becomes chair. Let me just address that one first and see if we're all good with that, or if we've got concerns or comments or other ideas.
Well, I'm not sure if I want to quickly put our capacities for decision making to the test, but I think I would prefer not to have the 1-year rotation of a chair. I think I would like to have, maybe it's a more flexible situation, but it seems very possible that someone would be chair. I guess it's the same reason I don't like term limits and so this could just be me as a person who thinks if I like the official who's serving, I want to keep the official who's serving. So that could be me, but I think my preference would be not to have them coming and going at that quick a pace of when you're.
Maybe a compromise is that the vice chair will be quite the leg up when it comes time for election, but if the membership chooses to keep the sitting chair or someone leapfrogs the vice chair, there's flexibility to do that. And the vice chair already has a pretty strong position anyway, maybe not a ironclad one as maybe Representative Benavidez was suggesting. But so yeah, maybe we just have it be flexible, and it'd be quite likely that the vice chair can move up, if not after 1 year, maybe after 2, but we can decide each year what the vote happens.
What
we
about,
have,
Pat?
let me get board member Ritter, and then I'll go back to Representative Benavidez. Ms. Ritter.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going down a slightly different trail here. I just noticed there was nothing about the process for the voting. And maybe that's in procedures, but I wonder if it should say by secret ballot or something like that, if we are electing each year.
Voting is later in the bylaws.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, even voting on officers? I
it's
was
just
just talking
voting in general.
Voting on officers. Okay, well, we might want to make a distinction for voting on officers relative to voting on, we wouldn't want to vote on a name change with the secret ballot, but we might want to do that for an officer vote, I would suggest.
I was gonna say to what Patty was saying and Richard, in that I'm one who doesn't like, I do like term limits. I'm the opposite. And I see being board chair as a way to get more members more engaged, because you have to pay more attention, you have to keep up with everything. And all of us I think, are capable of doing that. But I could see if we made the first chair for 2 years, and then the vice chair as chair-elect, so they'll be on it for 2 years, but then even after that, they would go for 1 year. So with the vice chair being chair-elect and working with the chair for 1 year, and then going into chair the next year, it brings that continuity of the officers there. But it might, put you more at ease for the first one. And I also want to mention what Johnie mentioned, which was timing in December. And because we're already in the end of October, and I'm just thinking maybe we should continue with a temporary and elect like in February or something, as opposed to December, because we're not going to have this stuff done and ready by then to really get moving on some of the stuff.
So I think that that's an interesting point. Just if we kind of do the math working backwards, we probably will be into the February meeting when we're then kind of stood up. We've got the bylaws in place, so we could do a temporary chair until we've got our operating protocols and bylaws all in order, our processes in order, and then elect a chair, and at that time do it annually at that point.
And Tim, Junie has her hand raised.
Oh, Board Member Joseph.
Thank you. I just have a question for timing. I don't remember, but are some of our board members 1 year terms, 2 years, and 4 years? Because I think that would help us understand how to better go about chairs and vice chairs when it comes to the term limits. Because if someone is in for a year, maybe we might want to offer them that opportunity or not.
So we have, there are 2-year terms. There are some that have 2-year terms and some that have 4-year terms.
For their first term, and then thereafter, everybody has a 4-year term. So it was designed to stagger the original creation of the board and not have all of you term out at the same time. So you've got some with 2, some with 4 for the first term, and then all of you would have a second 4-year term.
Board Member Joseph, does that clarify?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. So how does that sound that we begin the board terms, maybe not December, but when we do finally pick that board member or the chairperson, vice chair, like I said, perhaps in about February, or when we're ready. Thumbs up on that one. Okay, so we'll do that. And then if I understood it correctly, then we were exploring the idea that the chair serves no more than 2 terms. Is that just the first chair, or is that all chairs are allowed 2 terms total max?
What I was suggesting is that the first chair elected in February, that in February we elect a chair for 2 years and a chair-elect for 2 years, both officers for 2 years. And then at the end of 2 years, the chair-elect would become a chair for 1 year, and then we elect another chair-elect for
Okay.
1 year terms.
For 1 year.
The terms would go to 1 year after that.
Okay. Thumbs up or comments, discussion? Amy, we can write that into the bylaws there? Does that make sense?
I'm chewing on how to turn that into bylaws language. I think we'll probably, I mean, we are definitely going to not be ready to vote on these tonight. We need to make pretty significant revisions to them. So I think we're looking at bringing a redlined copy to the board at the next meeting. And if we haven't captured the spirit of what folks want, I'm sure we'll hear.
Okay, good. Okay, so on that was, I'm sorry, Article 5, Section 1. I think we've got that all clarified. Any other comments on that section? And with that, if I don't hear any comments, if we can adjourn for a 5-minute break. It is 7:19. Let's come back at 7:25 if that's okay. Okay, thank you. We stand in recess. Recognize that board member Terry Nelson has joined us by phone. And so Ms. Nelson, welcome. And we're glad you're able to join us.
Thank you.
Okay, I think where we left off was Article 5. Now we're down to Section 2, duties of the chairperson, looking at Deputy Attorney General Beatie, back to you.
Hi. Article 5, Section 2. This was just to assign duties to the chairperson. We've got the chairperson presiding over all the meetings, building an agenda in coordination with the board administrator and the executive director of DNR or his designee. Hi, Tim. Being aware of board and committee activities, holding votes, observing and enforcing the bylaws, and performing other duties as required. It was, again, just a proposal to share some thoughts with you about what the chairperson's duties could look like. Definitely open to hearing if you have thoughts, if you want to strike some, add some. It's up to you.
Comments, thoughts? Thumbs up if we're all good with this section. Looks like we are good. Johnny, I'm not missing any hand raises, am I? Johnny, you're on mute if you're responding.
Thanks, Tim. No hand raises.
Okay, thank you. Okay, sounds good. On to Section 3, Miss Beatie.
And that is just designed to provide leadership in the event that there is a problem with the chairperson who is either unavailable or otherwise unable to fulfill his or her duties. So we've got a structure that clarifies how we will have someone step in to assume the chair's role, and then that it is limited only to the meeting where this person assumes the chair's role.
Comments, thoughts? Thumbs up. All right, moving along. Article 6 meetings, Section 1, Miss Beatie.
Yeah, so I see a space that we need to delete. So we've got a typo. We'll definitely fix that. And so Section 1 just says that the board will meet at the call of the officers, a majority of the board members, the board administrator, or the governor. Section 2 sets out that your quorum is 7. And 7 and 7 is 14. Your quorum is 8. Right? Aren't you 15 board members?
We're 15.
So you probably, sorry, you probably want your quorum to be 8. So we'll fix that. And that there won't be proxy or absentee voting, that board members can participate remotely, obviously. That's going to be helpful moving forward, and that a meeting can be called or a meeting can be canceled by a whole group of folks in the event that there isn't a reason to have it or in the absence of a quorum. So any thoughts, questions, additions, subtractions?
Representative Benavidez.
Yeah, thanks for the fix of 7 to 8, because I had thought about that. But on the very first sentence of Section 2, it says the quorum shall be required for all actions of the board. And it never explains what we need for an action of the board, just that a quorum is there to have the board operate. But does an action of the board mean a majority of the quorum present? Or are some actions, and I think somebody raised it when, I think it was Cathy, when we get later to voting and how many votes we need. Because this is the only place I think there was for actions of the board. And how do we take an action of the board? Sometimes it's a majority of the entire board, or is it a majority of the quorum, which would only be, if it's 8, it would only be 5 people. And is that for recommendations that we're making? Is it for election of officers? For a lot of things like that. And I don't know, I couldn't find where those things are put into these bylaws anywhere.
The intent behind what you have is that a quorum would be now 8 people, and that 8 people would be required to take action on behalf of the board. My reading of that and what I had intended was that if 10 people show up, then 8 people are still required to vote on a particular item that is before the board. And a board meeting can't occur without a quorum. If that is not what the board would like to use, or if it needs to be better clarified, we're happy to do it.
Thoughts? And Commissioner Chimino, I know you had your hand up. I don't know if you wanted to speak on this or had a separate item.
Separate item, please.
Okay, let's knock this out. Representative Benavidez.
I think it needs to be clearer in here, because usually in bylaws, there's a section for the quorum, what constitutes a quorum for the board to meet, and then what's required to take actions. And if you're saying that every action of the board is a majority of those there, of the members of the board, so we need 8 to take any action, as opposed to a majority of
those present.
So I don't think it's clear from here at all. So I think those have to be 2 separate sections or something like that. And I don't want to go to C yet, because I think there's more discussion on that.
Fine. I saw board member Joseph, you had your hand up.
No, I just wanted to echo an agreement. I think I'm thinking as just a lay person, I mean, I can understand as a lot of you with your institutional knowledge, you understand this bylaw, but I'm thinking a year from now, I may not remember what is a majority and what does that mean? How many people in a quorum, how many people? So I think all these things, I understand you said there's other procedures, but at the same time, if it could be, just mentioned here, I think it might be easier instead of someone having to go through another step process to look through another document to find that information. I think the clearer we can be, even though it's a 6-page document, the better.
Okay, still to this point, any other comments or discussion? Ms. Beatie, can we take a shot at clarifying that? Would that be helpful? And I'm looking at the board members now and bring something back at next meeting.
Yes, except for what would you like us to bring back? Do you want a quorum of those present, or do you want a quorum, a hard quorum of 8 people in order for the board to take action?
Ms. Benavidez.
I think I don't have a problem if it's not on certain things that we're taking action, like the bylaws, like a recommendation on the naming of something, when it's a substantive matter to require a majority of the entire board. But there might be some things where that we might vote on. I can't think of what they are, that are more ministerial in nature, that we could use a majority of the quorum. And I think the other part of this, it doesn't say present, which is usually in bylaws too. It's the number that are present to establish a quorum, but present could also, at some point we may be meeting in person and not be doing remote. And I think it has to clarify that it could be physically in person and or electronically, because it could be by phone or it could be through a Zoom. And I'm not sure that's clear at all.
The provision in there that says board members may fully participate in a meeting via teleconference or by other remote means it doesn't cover that point.
Second part, yeah, I was starting at the top part, so it's okay. Never mind if you have it there. So they're considered present if they're fully participating.
Considering it'd be nice if we had some, probably some more specific kind of ideas in mind in terms of what the differences are in regards to the quorum needed for a vote. Otherwise, I'm kind of just wondering, is there an easy button that we could kind of hit that for all matters before the board that we agree that we have some level of quorum.
Is it-
Board Member Chimino, are you about to speak?
I guess on this matter, I would offer the thought, it seems fairly standard practice that once a quorum is achieved, then all matters that this board can act on can be acted on with a majority vote of those present. So you get a quorum, then the meeting proceeds. And I just think I don't know, I guess I'm leaning against trying to make some matters have to be a majority of the total board membership. I just would like to offer the simple button being what's more of a normal practice.
Board Member Benitez.
Yeah, I would echo that. I agree, because I think to Representative Benavidez's comments, that once folks are back in session, there may be a time when just having quorum will be enough to keep business moving. Obviously, keeping everybody informed through the staff's work on the CPW side.
Any other thoughts? Representative Will, are you?
I agree with that as well, Tim. I agree with that as well.
Okay.
Can I just?
I agree as well.
I agree generally that if once you establish a quorum, you should be able to act. But I think there are a couple of things we may want a majority of the entire board, not just a majority of the quorum present. And I can only think of two, and that's voting on the officers and voting on an actual recommendation that's going to go to the governor. That I don't think we want a recommendation from this board with only 5 members, because that was a majority at a meeting that only met quorum. And that's only 1/3 of the board.
Yes, I think I just wanted to add to that. I was doing, quorum is 8, majority is 15. So, I mean, to have, as you mentioned, 5 people decide for a member of 15, I think it'd be hard. So I would agree, maybe if there's any decisions to be made when it comes to just having a quorum of 8, it would have to be by majority as opposed to just a lower number than that.
Board Member, let me go to Commissioner Chimino and then to Board Member Ritter.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, Representative Benavidez makes a good point. This board, these place names can be very controversial. And so perhaps this board and the nature of recommendations to the governor regarding geographic place names, yeah, perhaps something along the lines of, we could have a quorum to proceed, but then the vote, if there's only 8, you have that one night where just 8 people show up. If it's unanimous, you still have a majority of the board and you can make a recommendation to the governor. But if it falls short, perhaps it's only 7 and it's not enough to make that recommendation, and we just wait for that place name for a future month's meeting. I like what Benavidez is recommending. It makes it more complicated, but perhaps the business of this board is important enough to warrant that extra bar.
I think I might have the easy button solution, which is, what if we establish that there needs to be a quorum in order to hold the meeting? And then we actually say in here that we will design procedures for voting that are specific to the things that the board will take action on. So if we're looking at the Article 2, Section 1A bucket of things, and you guys are designing procedures that that establish how you will consider name change recommendations, you can choose in that procedural document what threshold you want for a board vote in order to take action. And then you've taken it out of the bylaws, and it is on a case-by-case basis, because there are actually, it requires a 2/3 vote of the entire board in order to go into executive session, for example. So there are other places where there are different voting requirements that are statutory. Yep.
Ms. Ritter, you had your hand up. Do you still have a comment on this? Mute.
I was going to say, I think Amy came up with a great solution.
I'm not thrilled about that solution, only because we're here to do naming recommendations. That is what we're about primarily. And to say that's limited to policies, because when you look at the order of things, you go to the executive order, the bylaws, and then the policies. I think there's a way to do it in language where because we're talking about you need a quorum for the board to meet, and actions of the board could be a majority of those present at a meeting, except for votes on specific things. If it's for recommendations on naming or officers, that requires a vote of the majority of the board. That I think there's a way to writing, but that's our key component of what we do is the naming recommendations. And I don't want us to push it to policy and not address it in bylaws.
Thoughts, additional comments?
Well,
Board Member Benitez.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, I just think absolutely all the points are well-founded. If we agree to that, we just know that could slow us way down. So from a timing perspective, and this is Amy, I don't know if there's any kind of language on the planet that could be built to support that. How do you avoid the slowdown and keep business moving? So if we could continue a conversation, but pause that conversation through just with quorum, as was just said, and then when it comes to a vote, we walk into that vote that much further ahead. So I guess what I'm after is not having that delay, because well-founded, when we're voting on important things, we should be as present as possible, as many as possible. But if we've got quorum, which is enough to have a meeting, and that body can at least come to whatever their consensus is, that consensus gets carried to the larger body. Would everybody on the call agree then that at least wouldn't slow us down? My only concern is if we're pushing business already due to scheduling, is that a concern? If not, then I think that's perfectly appropriate.
Yeah, I do want to point out that this is, as individuals, everybody is exceptionally busy. I'm worried as we kind of get rolling here, and given the work before us and what we expect to come before us, that we do want to be mindful of being efficient and working through some of these things. With that, I think Board Member Limerick, did you have a comment? And then back to Ms. Ritter.
I think I would like to go with the notion that the quorum would be the decision-making number. And I would assume that if the quorum has assembled and they find that they are dealing with, as Commissioner Chimino says, one of those issues that does have a lot of passions and feelings involved in it, I would imagine that the 8 people assembled in the quorum would know that and would say, this is such a highly charged issue, I think we need to deliberate more. So rather than we will just, because we are 8, we will make a decision and others can deal with that. I would think those 8 people are 95% likelihood of saying, this is such a complicated issue, we should not have our final vote now and wait until we have whatever that number turns out to be, that we think is the number that would then, well, then there's another side of that. If we think we will get a number that will cause citizens who are distressed to not feel that distress, I don't know that the number of people voting will be the determinant of that. And I would also just think that a quorum that thought we may not want to be jumping ahead on this and speaking for our absent members, that quorum would have this very strong motivation to say, let's take this up at our next meeting. And what a set of gluttons for punishment it would be who would not do that, who would just say, let's just go forward and be the people who anyone wants to blame, who is planning to blame something. So I guess I'm with Luis. I think it took a long time to say that. I think it's better just to say the quorum is the acting unit, and a quorum of any sense is from time to time going to say, we're not ready to decide this and we want to have this taken up at a meeting where there's more attending.
Okay, Ms. Ritter?
Yes, I agree with the points of the two previous speakers. I think the bylaws also make it clear that it really is, it's really an expectation of each of the board members to be present. You know, obviously people will have conflicts, but the agenda will be published in advance. There will be notice of the topics that will be deliberated upon. I do share Luis's concern that if we put too many barriers in place for votes, it could really slow down the important work of this group. And we want to make certain that, you know, that board members who do show up don't end up being stalled in, you know, in their work and in their, you know, their willingness to dedicate themselves to the matters at hand. And I think to Patty Limerick's point, there's checks and balances in place. These meetings are conducted in the light of day. I don't think board members are going to rush into a decision without, you know, a substantial number of people on hand. That might be controversial, and those kinds of decisions can be delayed, but allowing the board to continue operating with a majority of a quorum on most issues will probably allow most work to be moved forward. So I would really come down on that side as well.
And so what I'm hearing is that there is a level of trust here that that we should have an expectation for one another here, especially when it comes to very sensitive matters, and that generally speaking for everybody here, I think we all agree with that and are willing to give that some thought when we walk into those proposals. And if there is something that is particularly challenging or contentious, then maybe we have got to at least try and respect one another, that those present will stand back and say, okay, wait a second, maybe we ought to hold this one for when we've got the greater body available.
And Tim, Junie had her hand raised.
I'm sorry. Was that Miss Joseph?
Yes.
I think you've actually said everything that I wanted to say, which I agree that I'm a little bit worried about having too many different processes, because again, it slows down the work that we're trying to do. And also, I think it could create confusion as well, because I'm sure you all support us with, you know, every step of the way, but nonetheless, if we have, you know, you have to have this many vote for this, you have this many vote for that, I think it confuses everything. And I did like Luis's idea when he talked about the quorum of 8 and unanimous, to me, because again, when I did the math, we have 15 members and 8 is in between there, 8. So it could be, the unanimous could really help us get just having that clean process. So I think, to me, I think efficiency will be very important. And also I'm wondering if this discussion we're having here, will we ever get to a point where we have half of a board really missing? So that's something that I'm not so sure, because I think most of us are probably really committed to this work.
Yeah. Any other comments? What I'm hearing, I think, is going back to what Board Member Benavidez had kind of laid out in support for that. And then also, though, at the same time, that we do pledge to one another that we will be mindful of the work and the interest of the topics that we are taking up, and be mindful of those that may or may not be present. Thumbs up, comments?
Okay. I'm going to go along with it, but I really, having separate votes. I mean, I write bylaws all the time for nonprofit organizations, and it's not unusual to require like a 2/3 vote to go in executive session, or even a 2/3 vote for officers, or for a major decision that we're going forward. And we can say we'll rely on one another, but when we have a contentious issue in front of us on a name, that there can be situations where we are going to be at different ends of it. And when we write something to say, we always need a majority of at least 8 for every action, I think it's a mistake, because there's going to be some things that are not difficult decisions, but we may not get a majority if we only have 8 there. But I mean, I'll go along with what everybody wants, but it is not difficult to identify specific important matters to require a certain number of votes and then allow the majority of a quorum to vote on everything else. And boards do it all the time, and don't get confused by it. But and we are not always going to be the same board members. You know, we don't know who all will be in it. I mean, I just think of elected officials. We don't always agree on stuff from different parties for different reasons, you know? So we may never get to the point where we'll all agree. And we're 3 members of the board. So it's, and I don't think it's that confusing. I think the language that we have here is confusing, but I think we could fix this. But if the board wants to go to require 8 for every action, no matter what it is, I'm fine with that.
Thank you. Ms. Berry?
No, we can always amend the bylaws at any time. I think we should get some cases under our belt and some experience. And if it ends up being a problem, we can end up changing the bylaws later.
Yeah, I suspect that you know, as long as we have our hands on the dials as we work through this and institutionalize our processes and our relationships and how we work together, and I think, you know, if we need to and we hit a rough patch, we can sit down and have that conversation. And if we need to revisit the bylaws, and then maybe that's an appropriate time at that point. Ms. Beatie, did you understand what Board Member Benavidez laid out?
I believe so. And I think Lindsey and I were just communicating, and I think we know how to draft what is being proposed. My inclination is to say that I'm going to run it through a few folks before we all meet again to make sure that we've gotten it right. Like, I think we're going to workshop it.
Okay, let's, for the sake of time, let's at least try and move through this and allow the AG's office to kind of try and come up with something. And then this is going to be back before us, certainly before we approve it or when we approve it. So we can have that conversation then. Does that sound okay? Thumbs up. Okay, thank you. All right. Board Member Chimino, I think we are still in the same section and you had a different point to raise here, and I'm not sure if that's still simmering.
I don't think we need to address my point. It concerns how we go about building our agenda. It looks like the chair will build the agenda. Other articles talk about it. And so I'll let that conversation go for now. And I think we'll work out how we develop agendas as we develop and grow.
Okay. Thank you.
There is a provision, hang on, where the duties of the chairperson in Article 5, Section 2 does say build the agenda in coordination with the board administrator and the executive director of DNR and or his designees. So are you asking for something more specific or different from that?
That was where I first saw it, and then I let another section come up. So yeah, some boards, any board member can request an agenda item be added, but we have a large board, 15 members is a lot. I think, like I said, we'll let it go and see how the process develops. And like Tim said, we have our finger in the dial, so we can maybe address that later, is my hope.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, unless there's any other, oh yes, who's that?
Sorry.
Yep,
I should
Board
have
Member
raised my
Joseph, sorry
hands.
about that, go for it.
That's okay. I just have a question. When it comes to the chair, it says the duty of the chairperson shall be, and I wonder with the vice chair, because the chairperson, well, it's a big job to have, and I wonder whether the vice chair would be as helpful as well as, you know, helping that person and guiding the process as well, as opposed to just the chairperson.
So in order to translate that, would you have a section, maybe a section 3, and we would then renumber section 3 to be section 4, that has some of the duties that are assigned to the chairperson assigned to the vice chair?
As you wish, but my question was, I'm sorry, I have a hard time thinking quickly on my feet sometimes. But it's a matter of, because again, the chairperson and the vice chair will be working together, it would be beneficial to have both of them be part of that process. And also, I'm just thinking the chairperson will be, it's a big job, because you'll be presiding over meetings and you will be building the agenda, and whatever that agenda is, which is, bringing forward name changes to us. I think having someone else as like a balancing, it will be necessary and important. So however you think you can work that out, I think that would be good.
Can I make a suggestion that doesn't actually require making a change in the language here? I think much of the responsibility that you're concerned the board chair will have will be shared with the board administrator. So so the board administrator will have a lot of responsibility to support the board chair in these activities as well. And when we spell that out in Article 12, it may be clearer that the board chair isn't carrying as much responsibility. Does that respond to your concern?
Board Member Joseph, mute.
Thank you. I think that's part of it, but I think the other part as well is balancing the, because I think, again, the person who's bringing the agenda, just balancing the opinions or the perspectives. So having another person to say, okay, we're building this agenda, but just having another person to help you think through the process, I thought would be helpful, as opposed to just that one person who's at the top serving 15 people. So if it's 2 people taking on that role together, I just think it might be more transparent.
Any additional thoughts or comments? Does anyone, do we agree? Do we disagree? What are you thinking here? Miss Limerick,
Yes.
it looks like you're about to speak.
I am, and I'm not muted. This is exciting. So I think I would like this notion that the vice chair is being groomed or headed towards that. I think that the more the vice chair is involved, probably the better. So that's compatible with a councilwoman here in that point of view, that to have the vice chair, I would assume that when we think about public responses and concerns, why isn't that on the agenda? Might be one of the things that the public would be voicing, some members of the public. So it would be better to have that process with the vice chair pretty significantly involved in setting an agenda. That seems like that's better for just the stance towards the public, that it wasn't just the administrator and the chair making that choice. That's, I don't know, it just seems like it, and it's better for the vice chair to be getting acculturated and brought into the circle. So I think I'm concurring with my councilwoman.
Okay,
I think I have a suggestion. Sorry, Tim, can I roll it out?
Please.
What if we changed it from the duties of the chairperson to the duties of the officers? And then all those responsibilities are shared, and the vice chair and the chair can arm wrestle over who does what.
I was just about to go there. So what do we think about that?
Fine with that.
Thumbs up?
Like it, it's good.
Okay, there you are. Thank you. Okay, so it is now 8:01. I want to do a time check here and see how we're doing. We are just about, what, 3/4 of the way-ish through the document. We can keep plugging through this. We can, if you want, while we're here, we can try and find some other time. How's everybody doing here?
Well, I'd vote for powering through.
Okay.
I vote for some other time.
One more other time.
Should we
Two,
take a vote?
I say another time also.
Let's put our nimbleness to the test right now. Let's see how good we are at this.
Okay, so I think we're getting kind of divided here a little bit, that for a straw poll, and I don't want to just draw the line here. I think while it's nice to power through, and I'm fine with that, we can always come back and continue to think about this just the same, if that's what we're feeling. I want to be respectful of your times. Representative Benavidez.
I just wanted to suggest if some people can't stay because we just said it and some people want to power through, that maybe we just, and there's going to be changes from our conversation already, that maybe we could go around and see if, like I made changes on my copy and maybe others did too. We comment on the changes that Ms. Beatie will know about, and then when she brings us another draft, she might be able to address those, even if we don't have full conversation about it.
Ms. Beatie, were you going to say something, or I will if you won't?
You go ahead.
What I'm wondering is we could even perhaps work through and make the changes we discussed tonight, send the document. I don't know, Ms. Beatie, if we can send the document out individually to the board members to then send back to you and to you only their suggested edits and comments. And then we can have the AG's office go over those, and then we can bring it before the full board and walk through all of those comments and edits together. How does that sound?
Mm-hmm.
All right, is that question posed to me, Tim?
It's a question to everybody.
Okay.
I want to make sure that legally we are okay with that process.
We can certainly work with individual board members on their concerns about the bylaws. My concern about that suggestion is that it does sound like people are approaching these issues from very different perspectives. And so I don't know how to call balls and strikes. If I get, a suggestion from two people to do one thing and two people to do another, I don't know how to reconcile the difference of approaches.
I think maybe if there's a way that we can sort of just identify those areas in the document where we do have difference of opinions, and then bring that back for discussion, identifying that we've received some differences there.
Oh, yeah. So, okay. So I think if in terms of process, I think I'm hearing you say that we will redline the things that we have already agreed on and circulate that document to everybody, and then allow the board members, my preference would be a red line, to redline their questions and concerns about the remaining parts of the document. And then we will flag maybe in comment bubbles, here's 6 different approaches we received for how to address this point here. And then we can queue that up maybe in a memo to the board with the red line version attached at the next opportunity for the board to meet. Is that sounding right?
Yes, that's kind of what I'm thinking. That way, then that allows the AG's office to kind of identify some of these issues up front, and maybe we can work through them already and quite quickly and efficiently, and then readily identify those discussion points that we have in the document.
Yeah, okay, I'm good with that. And that's certainly something we can do. So then I would just need some timeframes.
Yeah. So let me start off then. Is everybody okay with that idea for that process? Okay, so with that, we need your commitment that we are going to send these out, and we'll put a tight timeline, maybe a week or two, perhaps, to get us those comments back when the AG's office is able to send out the marked up document. And that way it'll give us some time to prepare for that next meeting and be ready to go for the conversation. Can we all commit to that then? Okay. Cool. So we will do that. And like I said, again, we will have that document go out. Johnie will send that out again, and then individually, please reply to, we'll outline the instructions, but I think we'll have you reply to Johnie and to Miss Beatie and Miss Ratcliff exclusively. Okay. With that, then, what I'm hoping for is this working in terms of putting out a doodle poll each time, or do we want to find a regular time? I know at the last meeting, you wanted to kind of alternate between days and evenings to accommodate those unique work circumstances that exist amongst this board. And so we can continue to put out that poll. I would like to try, this is the beginning of, we're not even in November yet, so I'd like to try and find some time, if we could, as soon as possible, maybe before the holiday season, before Thanksgiving. But we will see. I'll work with the AG's office to make sure that we've got enough time in there. Does that work to send out the doodle poll, or do we want to start thinking about a regular time?
I would appreciate it if we could start to figure out a regular time, even if it's every other month it changes or something, but that really helps me in scheduling.
What if we do this? If we had every other month, since we are on, I'm sorry, I'm looking for a calendar here. We are on, and I'd have to go back and see what this looks like overall, but this is a Wednesday evening, 6 to 8. So we can set every other board meeting for the last Wednesday of the month, let's say, do something like that. And then the alternating meetings would be, when was our last meeting? During the day. I'd have to go back and look at it, but it'd be that sort of, similarly, it was September 17th. So it would be the third Thursday from 1 to 4 o'clock during the week. And we alternate between those times. How does that sound as I just throw something out?
Mhm.
So this gets complicated then. So what that would do is that we are looking at the third Thursday in November is the 19th. And that might be a problem. I think it's a problem on our calendar. I think Amy.
I have the CWCB,
Okay.
and that's actually every other month. Wednesday and Thursday, that third week of the month.
I think Board Member Way has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not at all. I just remembered, I still have my day job, and my day job requires that I teach a seminar in the evening on Thursdays.
Okay, so what we will do this time, we will send out another doodle poll, and we will continue doing that until we see some trends starting to emerge, perhaps, and maybe we can glean something from that. But we'll send out a doodle poll and try and knock out the next meeting here. And so let's do that. How's that sound?
Okay.
Okay. And that means then we will also delay the discussion of executive session here until the next meeting. Is that okay, Ms. Beatie? Okay, I'm getting a head nod there. And then real quick, before we all go, I just want to bring a couple of matters here to your attention. And so let me pull up this document. Okay, I really do appreciate everybody hanging in there with us, and thank you so much. Miss Runyon is here, and so I just wanted to give a quick update here that we did get a quarterly update from the BGN. We will send that out to each of you here. It does include 3 new proposals for the Gore Range, Devil's Head, and Mount Evans. The BGN, we discussed this a little bit here with Ms. Runyon, and they will kick off the outreach for these proposals so we don't fall further behind. When we take up those proposals, we can then look at that outreach and supplement it as needed at that time. And then once we get caught up, we can talk about who's going to lead the outreach. Also, there's been an update on Squaw Mountain in Clear Creek County, which was a name change. As you all probably remember, we have a proposal to change the name to Mount Mistanta. And Miss Runyon, I think, reported the last meeting that the Northern Cheyenne Tribe had notified the U.S. Forest Service that while they support the name change and agreed that Mistanta, or Old Owl Woman, should be honored, they prefer that her name be spelled. And Miss Runyon, I don't know if you've got the pronunciation of this correctly or not, but Mistahihi.
I confess I have no idea. I probably should talk to the tribe and learn how to pronounce the name, so I apologize. I just cut and pasted each time, so I wouldn't even dare to make an educated guess. So I'm sorry, I don't at this point, but maybe the next meeting we can nail that down.
That's fine. We can send this in writing to everybody as well with our round of updates. And but just along those lines, that the original proponent had been informed and had withdrawn the proposal for Mount Mistanta and is now supporting the new proposal put forth by the Northern Cheyenne Tribe. So with that, are there any other questions or matters of interest for the board? Okay, again, I really appreciate everybody hanging in there and joining us tonight. We look forward to continuing to work with you. And with that, we stand adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you.